No part of me thinks that any rating system is a reliable source of information on whether or not the thing that you're looking up is of high or low quality, especially when it's something like a TV show or a movie, or in this case, books. It doesn't matter if the tool that you're using, let's use Goodreads as an example, tells you what their rating system means. The ratings are entirely subjective. If you go to Goodreads and you go to the My Books tab and you hover over each star, you'll see that they actually list out what each star is supposed to mean when you click it. Even if you look at these examples that I just put up on the screen, a 5-star, meaning it was amazing, doesn't actually give you any information. There is no universal definition for an amazing book. A 3-star is intended to mean I liked this book. But when you go and look for a book and you see that the rating is a 3.5, that doesn't look as good as a 4.5. So maybe you'd be less inclined to pick up a 3-star book, despite the fact that 3 stars indicates that the majority of people like that book. I don't really fully understand the intent of these rating systems, because no two people are going to rate the same book by the same internal scale in their brain. The same person one day could rate a book 5 stars and then come back a year later and realize, actually, maybe this is more of a 3-star for me. And that's just due to day-to-day life circumstances changing. And even outside of the intent behind a rating system and the perception of that rating system on the other side, you're still not ever actually rating the quality of a book. Sure, part of what goes into a review of a book is likely to be about the quality of the writing, but there's also always a bias, a personal bias of the things that you like, or the things maybe that you're even going through in your day-to-day life that make a book more relatable to you. So now you're more positive in your review. Whereas if you're reading about something that you have no interest in or can't relate to in any way, you're likely to like it less, to connect with it less, and to rate it lower. And even when a person tells you their own rating system that they subscribe to, that rating system, no matter how thorough they've been in coming up with these 10-point scale, and I go over each of these 20 categories when I'm reviewing a book, there's still no way to know that that person is consistently feeling the same things about all those 20 categories. There's a lot of nuance that goes into every time you review each of those categories. And with all that being said, and the knowledge that I don't actually think that rating systems are helpful as a tool for knowing whether or not you're going to like something, I do think that it can help to know what a person was thinking when they did leave their rating. So I thought I would take a few minutes today to walk through my rating system and just generally how I think about my star ratings. This is not necessarily what I think everybody should do. This is just what I do. This is what works for me and my brain. When I rate a book 1 star, that means that I actively dislike that book. I will go out of my way to tell somebody not to read that book. When I was looking through my Goodreads to try to find examples of this, I found that I only have one example of this. And that's because if I'm going to rate something 1 star, I will put that book down. I'm not going to finish that book because my time is worth more than that. With the exception of this one comic book that was short enough that I finished it, but awful enough that I did leave it a 1-star review on Goodreads. And that was a comic book about Moon Girl. There were no redeeming qualities about that book. The main character was absolutely insufferable, and I don't care what anybody says. That's a 1-star book, and I should not have bothered to finish it. But it was only 50 pages, and I finished it in 20 minutes. But those were 20 painful minutes. When I rate something 2 stars, it means that I would not recommend that book. So it's a subtle difference, but 1 stars, I would tell you not to read it. 2 stars, I just wouldn't tell you to read it. A good example of this is a book that I actually mentioned in my last video called The Fungus by Harry Adam Knight. This book has a lot of problems, and I don't like most of the choices that the author made. All of the characters are awful, and everything that they do, every decision that they make was terrible, and I disagree with just about everything that happened in that book. So I would not recommend that book to anybody. I am here not recommending that you read that book. But it was interesting. It kept my attention. I did finish the book, and I liked parts of it. I liked the world that was built and the problem that they had in the book. It was interesting to me. But the things that I did like were not explored enough, and the things that I didn't like had way too much screen time. Another example of a 2-star read from me would be The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I just really didn't like the way this book made me feel. I didn't like reading about the things that were happening in this book, but I know a lot of people do like it. So I'm not going to tell people not to read that book necessarily, but I am going to tell people that I kind of wish I didn't, and I will not be recommending it to people. I'm not the person to recommend this book because it really wasn't for me. When I rate something 3 stars, that means that I did like it and I would recommend it, but maybe only to specific people. If I know someone is into this kind of story based on other conversations that we've had about other books that I know that they've read, I'll recommend it to them. But it doesn't necessarily get a sweeping recommendation from me. I'm not going to go around telling everybody to read this book, but I liked it. A good example of this might be something like Stormfront, which is book 1 of the Dresden Files. I like this book. I really liked this book, but I gave it 3 stars, and that's because I don't think it's for everybody. I think it was for me, and I'm very much looking forward to reading the rest of the series just off of this one book alone. If somebody tells me they're looking for a quick, snappy read, maybe a filler book between 2 really long books that they're trying to get through, maybe I'd recommend Stormfront to them. Or if somebody I know is into detective stories and they're looking to get into fantasy, this is a great book for that person. But if all I know about somebody is that they're into fantasy as a whole, I'm not necessarily going to reach directly for Stormfront as my opening recommendation to that person. Another good example of this might be Jaws. Jaws is a good book. I liked Jaws, but I don't think it's for everybody. I honestly don't even think it's a book for people who like Jaws the movie. People probably like Jaws the movie because of all the action and big shark on screen stuff. The book was kind of more about an alcoholic and his failing marriage, with a little bit of shark sprinkled in. So I liked it, but it doesn't go out as a recommendation for somebody looking for an action-packed book. It's more niche. I would have to know a lot about a person before I tell them that I would confidently think that they would like that book. Elantris by Brandon Sanderson is another great example of a 3-star read. I liked it. I liked the world and the magic system that was set up, but I didn't like the quality of the writing. This was Brandon Sanderson's first published book, and it showed. But if I know somebody is really into Brandon Sanderson, I'll absolutely recommend that they read it eventually. I just would not tell them to read it first. I know some people like reading in publication order. I don't think Brandon Sanderson is the author for that because I really think Elantris is super slow, and unless you're already really invested in the Cosmere, which is his connected universe, I don't see a lot of people falling in love with him as an author after reading this book. To be fair, I did give Elantris a 3.5 because it does kind of bridge the gap here between a book that I liked and a book that I would rate 4 stars. A 4-star for me being that I really liked this book and I would recommend it to just about anyone. Elantris, again, is in that 3.5 range for me, but it does skew closer to a 3. Maybe a 3.25 is more fair. The story itself is something that I think a lot of people would enjoy, if that makes sense. There are plenty of books that get my 4-star rating. Books like Dracula, which I think is a fantastic book. Although slow at times, I really think that I could confidently recommend this to just about anybody, and that they would at least find things in that book that they would like. In a similar vein, Frankenstein, I think, appeals to a broad audience. It's not just this monster story for horror, sci-fi, gothic fans. It was really well written, and I think it appeals to a large audience. Of course, those two examples are two widely adapted and well-known stories, but my point stands. Similarly, books like The Martian and Project Hail Mary both got 4 stars from me. I truly think anybody could like these books. They are sci-fi, but the quality of those books transcends the genre, and I think anybody could enjoy them if they give it the time. The Green Hollow duology, Dungeon Crawler Carl, Circe, The Black Tongue Thief. These are all other examples of books that I've rated 4 stars on Goodreads. All of these books I enjoyed so much that I want more people to read them, even though I do kind of feel like they are targeted at specific people. A specific group of people might like these books more than others. Circe, for example, is a retelling of a Greek myth. Obviously, if somebody actively dislikes Greek mythology, I'm not going to push this book on them. But I might say, if you're going to try Greek mythology again, try Circe. Same with Dungeon Crawler Carl. If you know you don't like lit RPG, I'm not going to tell you that you have to read this book, but I am going to strongly suggest that you give lit RPGs another shot, and that you do that with Dungeon Crawler Carl. And then my 5-star ratings are very specifically not perfect books. These are books that I loved. They made a real impact on me. And not only would I recommend this to anybody, but I would buy this book for somebody. And for a lot of these, I have. I'm talking about books like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, the entire Mistborn Era 1 trilogy, the Monk and Robot duology, The Song of Achilles, all of One Punch Man. These are all books that have left a lasting impact on me, and that is something that I would want to share with somebody. These are books that I think that even if you actively dislike a specific genre, you should try these books. If you don't like fantasy books, I feel that you should still read The Final Empire, because that is the book that got me into fantasy. I had never really read fantasy before getting into The Final Empire, but once I read that, I was hooked. The same goes for The Song of Achilles. I had not really read a lot of Greek mythology before that, but once I read The Song of Achilles, I needed more of it. One Punch Man is the only manga series that I am fully caught up on because I can't stop. It's so much fun. The Monk and Robot duology is a fantastic example of what this cozy genre can be. Legends and Lattes didn't necessarily solidify me as a cozy fantasy reader, but Monk and Robot did. And so those are the books that I would absolutely recommend to people. I think these are books that pull people in from different genres and open their minds to explore others. So again, this is not me telling you that this is how I think that you should rate your books. This is just me hoping that I can give you a better understanding of how I will rate books and how I have been rating books and how I'm going to discuss books on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. And if you've made it this far, let me know down in the comments how you rate your books. What is your rating system? I think it's really interesting to hear how different people do this. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you say. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.